Hello viewers from wherever you're watching us from. You're watching QTV, the Gambia's first private TV station, and we're broadcasting from our studios here on Kairaba Avenue. And this is your weekly State of Affairs program here on QTV. My name is Aliou Cisse. This program is aired every Tuesday at 9 p.m. and repeated on Sunday at 10 a.m. If you miss any of our episodes, you can visit our YouTube channel QTV Gambia, where you can watch all our previous editions of the State of Affairs program. Well, in last year, 2022, heavy rains hit several regions of the Gambia, leading to widespread flooding across the country. Some houses were so severely affected, that the occupants had to be evacuated to public places such as mosques and schools. Well, according to official figures, over 50,000 people were affected and over 7,000 people were equally displaced. Well, according to many, aside from the impact of climate change, the causes of the floods are widely being blamed on what many say is the insufficient infrastructure and drainage, and of course, which actually render urban and rural communities vulnerable to the floods. Insufficient waste management is also another cause for the blockage of drainage and waterways in the country. Well, it is that time of the year again, and rainy season is just here. Well, signs are all over that we might be expecting another heavy downpour and windstorm this year. Just this year alone, we saw the first rain caused serious flooding in the upper river region and central river region. Well, joining me this week to discuss these issues and how prepared the Gambia is as far as the issue of flooding is concerned, I have in the studio Mr. Alassane Senghor, who is the Secretary General of the Gambia Red Cross Society. Mr. Senghor, good to have you on the State of Affairs program.
Thank you. Thank you.
And also in the studio we have Mr. Seling Diouf, who is the Deputy Executive Director of the National Disaster Management Agency. Mr. Diouf, good to have you on the program.
Thank you. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on the program. I'll start with you, Mr. Senghor. So far, what is the latest development as far as your assessment of the situation?
Thank you, Aliou, and thank you, viewers. I think, as you rightly put it into context, we've seen the first rains already very much affecting parts of the country, particularly the upper river region, as well as part of the central river region. And lately, also last week, Wednesday, we've seen heavy windstorm with rains that affected other parts of the country, mainly the West Coast region. So it seems that, once again, it's starting with a lot of destructions and a lot of people already homeless. So this is an indication that the preparedness work that we've done, although was partly sufficient, but I think there are other development things we need to look at.
We will go into detail as to what the Red Cross is doing and all those things. Let me just bring in Mr. Diouf here, National Disaster Management Agency. That's what you do. What is the NDMA's assessment?
Thank you very much, Aliou. Our assessment, as usual, we are very unprepared. As far as the nation is concerned, if I am to be candid, because yes, there had been some preparedness activities going on, but it's not sufficient enough to handle the situation, especially at a time when we don't know the gravity of the type of hazard that is hitting. You understand the type of impact it is going to give to the populace. Prior to the start of the rains, we embarked on drainage cleaning at Bakau, Ibo Town, Birkama, Jambar Sane, and other places, you understand, to ensure that, water flow, is there. We unblocked some of the blocked drains and so on. But like I said, for one to really understand the status quo and how things are unfolding is always difficult. We did all that, though we are not yet in August, where we expect the greater chunk of the rains. Instead, the hazard that hit hard was windstorm. You understand, which actually there hadn't been any much preparation done. Okay, but as a result of what you said at your opening statement, that the wrong settlement patterns that is there, the indiscriminate waste dumping issues, all these have some effects to the ecosystem, which sometimes when there are heavy storms, you know, this is what we actually expect. You would and I would agree that it has now gone to an extent where even the fruit trees that we eat, the mangoes, are now being chopped down as firewood. This is all, you know, affecting the fauna and flora. You understand? Allowing more rains. The trees that are supposed to serve as windbreakers are now being used into charcoals and timber and the like, making us more and more vulnerable. Because when it hits, there is nothing that would reduce its velocity, and then it hits our infrastructures directly. Automatically, we ended seeing roofs being blown off, etc., etc.
You mentioned the issue of clean drainage. How effective has this been in terms of, you know, addressing the issue of the easy flow of water?
Yeah, as it is now, it is okay so far, because we've not got that magnitude, that amount of rains that would cause flooding. Like I said, remember, we are just in the month of July. It is in August when we expect that heavy rainfalls. So that's where we can actually gauge the level of the work that is done. But what I do know is that a lot of them have been unearthed, you know, the debris collected and taken away. So how effective it is until when we get that much amount of rain that we expect, and then we see nothing happening or very little flooding happening, then that's the time we can gauge its impact. But I think it's too early now for people to start gauging the impact of the work.
Before I come back to Mr. Senghor, I mean, you talk about the issue of people cutting down trees.
Yeah.
Who will you blame this on?
Well, generally it has to be every Gambian or all those that are embarked on it. But there is already a department mandated by law to handle the issues of trees and issues of deforestation. And they should take, you know, their actions as necessary to ensure that whoever cuts a tree either plant 2 others or 3 and ensure its survival than just chopping it down for your own economic gains and you are scot-free. I mean, we have reached a time when we need to take the law by its in the way it is supposed to be, not to allow people to do things as they want.
So in a nutshell, you are saying we are not enforcing the law.
The laws are not being enforced as expected.
Okay, Mr. Senghor, I mean, you have heard from Mr. Juve. I mean, despite all what he said, cleaning the drainage, but you heard him said we are very unprepared. How do you react to that?
Well, I agree with him in terms of at national level, in the sense that preparedness and response, first and foremost, is the responsibility of the government. So the government here, represented by the NDMA, should have a national, well-prepared plan, and identifying the hazards and the risk and the gaps and the resources available and the competent institutions who could do what and who has what resources to be able to both mitigate and respond. But this is absent. And that is why in the absence of that national well-prepared plan, we as Red Cross, we have our own plan as an auxiliary to government, because as you know, this is our core business. So we don't wait for government whether they are prepared or not. We have a system that we have in place, and that has worked effectively during the past years, and even this year more, because the response time to these small disasters that we have witnessed so far was very, very short. The night, for example, the last Wednesday windstorm that happened in West Coast, 1 hour after it happened, our teams were already on the ground with the community. So our aim has always been to close the gap from when the disaster happens to when we respond. And this we have, and I think for Red Cross perspective, together with partners who are supporting, and of course NDMA, because I can here say that despite the lack of national preparedness, on the ground at regional level, there is strong collaboration between the NDMA teams and our regional teams. So I think with that we have had the resources, and we still have the resources. Because what we've done is we have plans, we know where it could struck, and we have our volunteers and staff trained, and we have pre-positioned stock in all the regions that can be accessed and used within the shortest possible times.
You talk about the lack of a national plan. Mr. Tajuf, why there is no national plan, and who is responsible?
The issue is the concept and context in which he uses the national plan is different from perhaps the way I'm going to interpret it. There is what we call a national contingency plan, which outlines all the hazards that hits the country. It outlines who should do what, when, and where. But remember, that contingency plan needs to be resourced. And that's where the problem is. Okay? We have what we call an emergency fund that is supposed to get the resources so that within 24 to 48 hours of whatever the hazard is, NDMA would be in a position to respond. As we speak, that particular account has no butut. So what we had to rely on is to collect the data, look at them, segregate them as expected, face government and say this is what is the number of people that are affected. And you and I know how much the bureaucracy nature in which government works. Before it goes, approval is given, people are dying. So the best practice is what he has just said. Every disaster agency, before the start of the rains, must be able to identify some of those communities that are needed, primarily, and ensure that they are procured and they are prepositioned. Prepositioning meaning taking it closer to the people, so that when it happens, within 24 hours, it reaches the people. When you talk about national preparedness, in actual fact, we are referring to national institutions getting themselves prepared. Let me give you an example. NAWEC, the erratic nature of the electricity these days. Before every rainfall, they should undertake an assessment of all their equipments. Know which one are working well, which one are not working, which one needs to be repaired. What are the trees that are likely to hinder the system? They work on that. Forestry, they should undertake. Look at the old trees that are around and make sure that they bring them down before they brought themselves down as a result of windstorm. Physical planning, they should ensure that how much of the old structures do you have in town, in which it's not safe for people to live or live nearby. So, because those structures can fall anytime. So every institution must make an institutional assessment of your current situation and come out with plan B. You understand? To make sure that anything that happens, there are remedial measures that one could rely on to put this in. But this is not happening. When you talk of disaster in this country, they think of NDMA, they think of the Red Cross.
I just want to interject here. I mean, why do you think NAWEC, the Forestry Department, are not doing this, and what evidence do you have to substantiate this claim? The
fact of the matter is we had been engaging them. We had been, NAWEC, for example, we had engaged them to get a contingency plan. Okay? Likewise, the Department of Forestry. Likewise, the Department of Physical Planning. Likewise, other departments. It is only the Ministry of Health that had worked with us to come out with a contingency plan. It's called the Health Sector Emergency and Response Plan. The Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education equally. And I'm saying that each sector should have that document. Because each sector, is subjected to be a victim of disasters. And the reason why I want to emphasize this is that disaster is the only phenomenon that can make government or any other institution to lose millions of your investments. Even at this QTV, there has to be plan B. In the event you are overwhelmed, where are you going to operate? Do you have plan B to move somewhere and your operation continues? That should be the thinking.
It's interesting. Like you said, we saw what happened last year. The heavy downpour affected so many households. Mr. Chong, let me come back to you. Earlier on, you talked about the lack of a national plan. But you said, at Red Cross level, you have your own national, you have your own plan. Could you just say with us, how do we prepare for for this?
Yeah.
For such events?
I think I would just go back a bit to what he said. I mean, I think it's clear that in every country there is a preparedness or emergency plan. But it remains a plan if it is not activated, because there are different levels of planning. You have the national disaster plan, and then you plan for every type of disaster. And then you assess in terms of what are the needs, what are the types of disasters, what would be your response mechanism, who has the competencies and the capacities, and then how will that be coordinated. And I think this is what is lacking. When we know this is an annual thing that happens, every year we have floods and windstorms. So we should be able to learn from the past and improve in the next one. And every year we should have a plan. What we do in the Red Cross is that when we respond, like last year we responded to the floods, at the end of the response, we did what we call lessons learned, where we brought together all the agencies and institutions, including the beneficiaries, the people who benefited from our services, to tell us how we perform and whether our response was adequate or not. And on the basis of that, we are able to develop a new plan for the next year. So that's how it works, so that you know exactly the quality and the timeliness of your service, whether it made the impact that was required or not, and then you adjust. So the planning process happens that way. But at the same time, you also need to look at certain critical things. I mean, like my colleague from NDMA was saying, that in terms of disaster preparedness and response, this multi-sectoral approach. But the leadership, in my view, the leadership is what is required to mobilize all those things. I can give you an example in Lamin, when I went to Lamin on Thursday, where we had a lot of trees, branches, power lines off and so on. There were live current when we went there up to 14 hours, 2 p.m. There was live current on power lines that were down, okay? And the communities there were saying, yes, we have been calling NAWEC and they have not been around. And that's a risk. So therefore, the contingency planning, if it is well planned and there is leadership, what should happen is each and every sector should be accountable for whatever happened. Like if there is windstorm, NDMA should be able to provide that leadership to trigger the leadership of NAWEC. They should be given the authority and the power to be able to push NAWEC and all the other government or other NGOs or institutions to act fast and quick.
And you talk about the issue of planning. Must this also include financing?
Of course. I mean, like he was saying, for us we have two types of financing. One is that we raise resources through our system to buy stock and preposition. But we also have a system with our head office in Geneva where if a disaster happens and it goes beyond a certain threshold and it's beyond our capacity to respond, then we can trigger what we call the Disaster Emergency Response Fund. That can be released within 24 to 48 hours. Then we can procure and act. But we already have a pipeline of both equipment, material resources, and financial resources that enable us to act. So if he's saying that the Disaster Emergency Fund is zero, I mean, I think this shows that there's no plan at all, because it's just a paper that is there, but not a plan.
Do you agree? I was coming to that exactly. Do you agree with him that without the financing, there's no plan? It's just a mere paper.
I said it first. I mean, if I'm given the responsibility, I should be given the tools to operate. There are tools that are needed to enhance my work. If the tools are not there, and this is why, if you look at the trend of our response, NDMA is always last to come. You'll have the Red Cross will be there, other humanitarian institutions will be there. We are always last to come because the system in which we have to undertake before getting the funds takes weeks and months when people are dying. So the reason why, if you look at in the framework, that's how it is done. That is how every government or disaster institution should operate. You have to get the funds readily available for us to act. And in fact, that's too far. To me, response is the last bit. Disaster management is a process. It starts from somewhere, response comes last. And it's cheaper to prepare or to prevent or to mitigate than waiting until it happens. You start to respond. You know, already we had made what we call a hazard profile of the country. It's available. What are those hazards that normally hits the Gambia? It's already known. What should be done to remedy their situation is already there. But their resources is needed to have them addressed. In the absence of those resources, we cannot move forward. And like I quite agree with him, with all that we do, leadership is very important. It's very, very pertinent. Because it's through leadership that you build the confidence of your donor community, of your government, etc., etc. So we need to have a leadership that is well respected, that is very focused, that knows issues and ready to collaborate with people. Okay? That's the only way that we can handle the issue. Not that we don't know the problem. We did it. Because if you do hazard profiling of every country, it tells you what are those issues.
And Mr. Senghor, it talks about the need to have someone who will provide the leadership. In your opinion, who should provide that leadership? Well,
I think the NDMA, from a policy point of view, has the authority as a national institution to provide that leadership. Whether it is being provided, I mean, we can all see it's not happening, because if it had happened, I think we would have enjoyed it. Under normal circumstances, from what I know, it should be a convener, a role of a convener, to bring everyone together and say, as he was saying, these are the hazards and the risk and the potential for this. And then you have scenarios, and you say who is competent to bring what and who has what resources. And then NDMA would provide that leadership and the push. Let me just say that, as he was saying, disaster management is a process, it's a continuum process. And it starts from policy, administration to the actual response. So this is what the three components of disaster management. So we may have the policies in place, but we may not have the administrative systems. And that's what he was talking about. Because if you have the policy, but you don't have the administrative systems to show you how you're going to implement the policy, then you fail. Then the last part, which is the response, you cannot. Then on the other hand, the continuum process is not only about responding, but when you respond, you look at how you prevent the occurrence. And this is where it comes back to what you said, the structural issues. Because I believe that in my own point of view, yes, there is climate change and all these other aspects, but there is a structural problem, and there is an economic problem as well. Structural is linked to the economic, in the sense that when you look at windstorms, the way the houses are constructed today with climate change and the strong winds, they are no longer adaptable to the current climatic conditions. So what we should look at as a country is, how do we invest in poverty reduction, but helping communities to build safer and stronger roofs or houses. And I think this is an issue. It's not enough to, well, drainage is fine and so on. But when you look at the provinces, they don't have drainage problems, but they have problems of the structure of their houses. But they cannot go beyond what they have because they don't have the resources. So how do we build that to poverty reduction strategies to support communities to withstand the next windstorm? So this is the whole thing. And this is where now we come in. I'm saying this within the context that we as Red Cross and the International Federation is the convener when it comes to the UN system, is the convener for shelter. And what we did last year and the year before for windstorm, when we supported communities, we trained they are carpenters, and we gave them resources to build their, to do their roofing differently. And I'm not sure, well, it's subject to confirmation, but some of those houses that were blown off by the wind 2 years ago are still there. So I think this is where we need to think differently. Now start thinking of how do we do the disaster management continuum process, not only preparing, responding, but prevention and also mitigation, which includes how to strengthen the household income or livelihood so that people can live better. When I visited some of the houses in the West Coast, honestly speaking, I was devastated the whole day, because when you look at the structures, people are still living, in absolute poverty, which I think we need to think wisely. How do we help and lift the communities? And I think this is one of fundamental things we need to look at.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Alassane Senghor, who is the Secretary General of the Gambia Red Cross Society, and Serimodou Diop, who is the Deputy Executive Director of the National Disaster Management Agency. We'll go with a short break, and when we return, the discussion continues. Do stay tuned.
Technology has always been at the forefront of our lives, and the way we use it has evolved drastically over the years. With the advent of 5G internet, we are entering a new era of technological innovation that promises to transform the way we live, work, and play. 5G internet is capable of providing data speeds up to 100 times faster than 4G, making it the ideal solution for streaming high-quality videos, playing online games, and downloading large files on the go. 5G internet is already transforming cities across the globe, powering smart cities, self-driving cars, and virtual reality experiences that were once thought impossible. 5G internet is also paving the way for Internet of Things, allowing for seamless connectivity between devices and the creation of a truly connected world. For the first time in the Gambia, QCell is bringing tomorrow's technology to you today with the launch of QCell 5G Internet. Get ready to experience the out-of-this-world wonders of QCell's 5G Internet. For more information, call 111. QCell. We innovate, others follow.
Hello viewers, welcome back from the short break. You are watching QTV State of Affairs program here on QTV. My name is Aliou Cisse, and this week we are discussing the issue of flooding, of course, disaster as we enter the rainy season. I mean, we know the Gambia is very prone to flood, as we have seen last year and even this year so far. Well, like I said, my guest this week, Alassane Senghor, who is the Secretary General of the Gambia Red Cross Society, and Serimodou Diop, who is the Deputy Executive Director of the National Disaster Management Agency. Mr. Diop, just before we went on to the break, you have heard from Mr. Senghor. How do you respond to some of the points he raised?
Yeah, I think he's quite right. I'm quite in agreement with all that he has said. That is just to say that in the domain of disaster risk reduction, everybody has a tick. You remember the housing issue he talked about. There is a special department that is responsible for that. You come to the issue of works. How many of our tar roads we see are constructed with drains? They just blacken it and we call it a road. Naturally, it has to be, drainage systems has to be properly prepared before then you put the road on top of it. All this highway just before your studio, you understand, there are no drains. It's not accompanied by drainage systems. So resulting to flooding at the end of the day, because the water must have a way, if not it has to create its own way. So each ministry or department has a take in the domain of disaster risk reduction.
You've been giving us all the problems, but as an agency, do you have a strategy in dealing with these problems?
We have a strategy. There is a strategy, but the strategy,
what is it?
There is a DRR strategy. That's a disaster risk reduction strategy, which needs to be popularized for everybody to know. But the fact of the matter is, I'm not taking the entire thing, putting it on NDMA. NDMA is a coordinating institution to ensure that they create a level playing field for everybody. Works can come in, physical planning can come in, any other department can come in. We are there to facilitate, to help them do these things. Because we are not experts in all the domains, remember? Okay? We create that platform where everybody sits, and then we look at issues and discuss, and then we decide who does what, when, and where. And that's where the point he was talking about. And as we speak, there's already a coordination team And we are meeting every month, trying to identify issues and see how best it could be addressed.
I'm talking about coordination. Mr. Senghor, are they coordinating well?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I mean, we even last week there was a joint meeting. The assessments on the ground are done jointly between Red Cross volunteers and the NDMA teams on the ground. So I think at that level, really, it's working very well.
At that level, but how about at the top?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the top we also coordinate, but I think coordination is relative. It depends what you mean by coordination. In my view, where we have a problem is what he just said, because I think coordination is one word, but I think it's about providing leadership. Leadership and guidance. And leadership is all about creating an environment and giving a direction in terms of where you want the country to go in terms of disaster preparedness, mitigation, and response.
And talking about the issue of lack of leadership, how does this affect your work?
Of course it affects our work, as you and I know. I have my...
Tell us how.
Yeah, this is, I have, in the work that you do, you have your limitations. Yeah. Everybody has your limitations. You have your terms of reference, you have your limitations. That's where you start, that's where, and there is a point you start, there is a point that you end. Somebody picks it up from there. However, for the coordination for this year, I'm picking it up myself. I'm the one chairing all the coordination meetings so far, okay? And we ensure that we put all the subcommittees that are needed in a real response are put in place, and each of the subcommittees that is there have got a chair and a secretariat. We have the WAS subcommittee, that's Water and Sanitation subcommittee. We have the Shelter and Protection subcommittee. We have the Food subcommittee. We have the IMS, Information Management subcommittee. All that is there, and they meet to make sure that they enhance, they come and report back to the bigger body, which is the coordination team. And that has never been in place. It was part of the lessons learned from last year, that for us to move forward, we need to have subcommittees tasked with the responsible of looking at specific areas. We have the Health and Environment Subcommittee, which is headed by NEA. You know, we have the WAS subcommittee headed by UNICEF, Food headed by WFP, Shelter and so on headed by NDMA, and so on. And each of them got their members, and they meet, prepare their minutes, and then bring it forward to the coordination meeting. At least that level of organization is being seen, and we hope the status quo would continue in the coming months.
And Mr. Senghor, I mean, you seem to be doing well, Red Cross, but how is the lack of leadership really affecting your work?
Well, it's not. I mean, I think, well, it's affecting in terms of the at national level, because I'll give you one practical example. When we were in Lamin, our volunteers were there with the NDMA teams trying to collect data, and there were electric poles that were down. And that really, if there was coordination, the leadership from NDMA that is able to command for other sectors like NAWEC and others to respond effectively and in a timely manner, then it would have been better. So that really affected, that's how it affected. That's just an example.
Yeah. Let me just expand on that point.
Okay.
What he meant here is, in real disaster situation, the head of the institution should be able to direct any other institution in the entire country. Like that issue of the electricity, he said. At least the executive director, for example, could have called NAWEC immediately and give instructions that that be done. Or call the police and give instruction that the entire place be coded by policemen, and people will be posted there immediately. That's the power that the executive director has and should be executing. You understand? Because in any humanitarian work, your primary responses or your primary target is to have a safe danger zone. That is, the people that you deploy in the field, their safety and security should be priority one. Now, if those people's lives are at risk, how do you expect them to do the work as expected?
You talk about, I mean, the executive director in this case could have called NAWEC, could have called the police. But how come he hasn't done that?
Well, I'm not in a position to respond on that. That's on an individual basis. I have to be candid in all that I'm speaking. Like I said, as the Deputy Executive Director, I have my role, but I have somewhere that I couldn't exit. You understand? But the fact of the matter is, these are issues that should be there, that we must have to be seen to be leading the process, to be taking critical decisions at critical times. Sometimes the decision could be implicative, but you have to take the risk. Once you accept the position, you got to take the risk and take certain decisions. Remember, it's not you the person, it is the people that you are there to save.
But you are here as a Deputy Executive Director. Couldn't you have discussed with your with ED about these issues? You're a senior officer at the NDMA.
The issue is, we have it on black and white. Okay. You have it if in any contingency plan, if there are disasters, who should do what is there. I don't have the right, or by law, to activate or deactivate. There is a system. Okay. When disasters happen, if you are to operate, you need to activate the plan. To say the plan is activated, therefore all hands should be on deck. When the operation is finished, you have to deactivate, that is to close the session. I, as a deputy, don't have that mandate to do it.
So who has it?
The executive director.
But you are his deputy. But you are his deputy here. But executive director.
I think I'm being clear. As a the document did not say that the director or the deputy executive director has the power to activate or deactivate. It says it is the executive director that activates. It is the executive director that deactivates, unless I am delegated to, like this particular program. Yeah. You called him, and he said he has some other assignments, and called me to step in. That's the time I have the power and authority. You understand? In the work that you do here, you don't do anything. There are things, if they are not delegated to you, you can't do, despite the fact you know or you can do. You understand? I'm in a public medium.
Exactly.
I ensure that all that I say is in line with the regulations that are in place.
Yes, Mr. Senghor, I mean, with all the inadequacies at the NDMA, am I right to say now we should say, instead of disaster management agency, we say disaster response agency? Because they only response. They only...
well, I know, I think like I said, disaster management is about policy, it's about administration, it's about the response. Yeah. And I think the policy, as he said, the policies are there. I think it's the administrative, which also includes the management system, that needs to be sorted out. And if it were my institution, I would have done a revamp in terms of transformation to look at that. Why is it not functioning? And then transform and look at the system. Because you cannot, I think it's also linked to the government, because you cannot run an emergency response institution the way you run a government bureaucracy. And I think this is the starting point. So that's why I believe that the government needs to rethink of the whole system and look at how efficient they want NDMA to be. Because you cannot continue to be run like a government department when you are supposed to prepare and mitigate and respond to disasters. So I think my view is really, and I think I have the right to it, government needs to rethink in terms of whether revamp the whole system and restructure, reorganize it in a way that it is more efficient and it's more fit for purpose rather than what we have today.
Do you agree with him, Mr. Youth?
Yeah, the issue is, if you look at the way we operate, we are a subvented institution. Yes. If you go around the world, national disaster agencies are vote holders, looking at the nature in which disasters or hazards unfold. And it is only in that order, if we become a vote holder, that we will be able to be more effective in the assignment given to us. As a subvented institution, you are just given a token. What is given? Let me give you an example. If you should get 2.4 million per month, you are given 1.2. You pay your salaries, you buy other logistical element, the money is finished. What activity can you do? But as a vote holder, you would be able to deal direct with the National Assembly members. They should be able to give you the resources that are needed and then ensure that it is accounted to the latter. Okay?
Yeah, if I may, I think, Serij Modu, you are right, but I have a feeling, it goes back to what I said earlier on. If an institution doesn't provide the right leadership and doesn't have the vision, clear vision in term and clear strategy of what they want to do, it will not fly, it will not go. It's like the Red Cross. We had several years ago when the Red Cross was almost completely down, but we had to transform it into an institution that has a vision, one has a clear mission and a purpose, and also a clear strategy of what it wants to do, and the leadership that we provided built, re-establish the confidence of donors to come back and put money there. So I believe that not only in terms of subvention, but I think the NDMA itself could have been a very viable institution, provided that it is fit for purpose, it has good leadership and clear vision, and well-motivated staff, and the policies and procedures are clearly articulated, that is fit for an institution as it should be, not as an ordinary or normal government structure.
Yeah,
then the resources would come, not only the vote, but donors are sitting and they're looking for serious institutions, especially when you have to deal with disaster management to invest their money.
I just want to come in here, Mr. Juve. I mean, so far, I mean, the data that we have seen as far as, I mean, the disaster that has occurred so far, we have seen like almost a total of 9,745 households or persons in this case have been affected by the floods, and 620 households affected by windstorm. I mean, how worried are you?
Well, he said it earlier on. This is just the beginning.
Just the beginning, and we are seeing this figure.
I mean, it's going to add on. Come August, we expect to see more and more figures happening. Okay, as a result of the hazards that are unfolding. Like there are so many factors. He was able to name some of them. The way we put up our structure, the way we have our own infrastructure, and so on and so forth. All these are causes for it, and this is why, in most cases, we have what we call hotspots that are identified in this country. And these hotspots are known to government. And this image we are saying, this is in Basse. This is just the first rain of this year. Exactly. That's why if you look at the trade, Basse had over 4,000 plus that are affected.
4,419.
And the figure is going to add on to it. So it becomes our collective responsibility to make sure that we get people informed, to better prepare ourselves. In fact, preparedness is almost late because already we are facing the brunt of it. Okay, so all these things should have been done well before in April, May, June. The sensitization should have been there. You understand? People know what to do, what not to do, and so on and so forth. You understand? So collectively, there is a lot we can do. Okay, but again, like he said, we need that strong, dedicated and visionary leadership if we want to move the agenda forward, without which we'll be doomed, because donors don't put in their monies on places where they don't have confidence into, because they are result oriented. Not that we have the technical people, we have the dedicated staff at the NDMA who knows it and can do it, but are they given the opportunity? That's another issue. So we must have to look inwards, try to look at what are those issues that is making us not functional as expected as an agency. But we try to solve them. And in solving them, it cannot be me, it cannot be you, it has to be government. The fact is, it has to be government. Okay? What we can do is to identify the issues and put it before them. It is them who takes the decision. Then from there, we move on. Remember, I said it in my previous statement, that yes, if the status quo continue the same, it's not only the people, but even government is going to lose. Disaster is the only phenomenon that can make you lose your investments of millions within a minute. And who is investing for our development? It's government. So if everybody is keeping quiet, nobody is ready to take action. We are not as proactive as expected. Tomorrow we will all suffer the consequence.
And Mr. Senghor, earlier on I mentioned the factors being blamed for for the flooding and other disasters, climate change in this case. I mean, how has climate change changed the way, I mean, how Red Cross, carry on with their work?
Well, going back to, I mean, I like what I said earlier on. I mean, we always do context analysis. At the beginning of the year, we have our plans, and we work across what we call the nexuses of humanitarian development and peace. And when we develop our plans, when it comes to humanitarian, we look at what are the possible scenarios. And we all know, I'm sure some economists would not agree, but I believe that there are three factors that affect the world today, which is climate change. The second one is the COVID-19. The third one is the conflict in Russia, and of course what is happening in Sudan now. And from a humanitarian point of view, I strongly believe in that, especially COVID-19, in the sense that when we look at where COVID started in Asia, this is where we order our rice and all those other things and the like. So the supply chain was broken, stopped for a couple of months. And that was obviously going to affect us. And this has affected us already. So it's just an example. I remember in the early days of COVID, when I was engaged with the government, one of my analysis was what we should do something, predicting that was going to happen, but nobody listened, okay? And today we are facing it. So for us in Red Cross, we look at all those factors, and then that helps us to see how we first help to mitigate. We have been engaged in a lot of livelihood projects lately, where we support women in vegetable gardening, so that they can improve the household livelihoods in the household. And that is one way of helping them to earn income, to be able to build better houses and to send their kids to school, to have access to medical services and so on and so forth. So climate change is all about what you do to prevent. We have been engaged in a lot of tree planting exercises. But again, this last windstorm makes me think of what do we do next, because when you look at, if you go to Lamin, where I visited, branches, huge trees that were uprooted. So that means there are stronger winds. So what do we do? But the reality is that the trees, I was telling the community there, when they say maybe we should cut these mango trees because they fell on our house, I said no. This is what saves you, because if the trees were not there, it would have hit directly on your house, and everything would have been gone. So I think we need to invest more in tree planting. We need to invest more in awareness creation, and we need to invest more in strengthening the livelihood of households.
And it's good you tell us how the Red Cross is involving the community. I mean, how about NDMA? How do you involve the communities to build their own resilience?
You know, in most of the activities that we do, like tree planting exercises, we're embarking on it. Capacity building, we're embarking on it. As we speak, there is no region or municipality that we have not created a contingency plan. And what is a contingency plan? Those are the identification of hazards that affect a community, and tell them what action should be taken, how they should take it, who they should contact, etc., etc. Those are part of things, knowing what are some of the hazards that is
But with all these plans, I mean, you're still under resource.
Yeah, that's now the issue. That's why it boils down to that. Because you can have the plans, you can have the technical know-how, but if nothing is not done, at the end of the day, when it strikes, you are the hardest hit. Let me just give you an example of Kuntaur. When it struck, everybody was crying. Could you remember those days? Yeah. It was a surprise to everyone, but not a surprise to me. Why? Because we undertook this study and informed government that Kuntaur is part of the hotspots, and A, B, C, and D should be done to avert this, whatever calamity that may befall them. We were not listened to. So when it strike, I said, we told you. You understand? And as we speak, all the hot spots almost in the Gambia have been earmarked, recommendations given and shared with government for them to see. Remember, we are a government agency. They need to resource us to be able to do certain things. That's true that if we are really dedicated with a very clear, transparent plan, we can get resources to come. But
are you in a nutshell blaming the government for the inadequacies at the NDMA?
I am not blaming, partially, yes, because in the domain of disaster resolution, everybody has a take, but the primary duty bearer is government.
Mr. Senghor, do you agree with him?
I don't know, but yeah, I think from his perspective, but in my own view, I think I go back to what I said earlier on. I think the leadership in an institution like NDMA is both ways, from top then downwards as well. Downwards, exactly coordination, supporting institutions and doing all the planning and everything. Upwards is guiding, pushing government and helping them to do exactly what they are supposed to do. Because, you know, let's face it, they have other responsibilities and equally important institutions or unit that they manage. But for example, me, if I sit here, my headquarters in Geneva has 190 national societies that they support. But I deal with my domestic issues, but if I want them to support me at Geneva level, I have to trigger that. So, and I need to guide them in terms of where my priorities are and where I want them to support. Maybe they've done it. But that's my take on the... So
meaning it should just go beyond just being around the corridor of power, but you should use that influence to push for things.
Yeah. This is why I'm putting government as the primary duty bearer, because that's where they are elected in office.
But that's the leader.
You understand? And once that is done, you understand, then comes now what he is saying, and onto the leadership of the agency now to be pushing. You understand? Prioritizing the activities to government. Let them see its relevance. Okay, and ensure that they understand. So some of them perhaps may not have that perception. They may not even understand the whole concept of DRR. It is our responsibility to let them know who we are.
Exactly.
It is our responsibility to conduct sensitization with the National Assembly members, with cabinet. Let them know the importance, the relevance, and what it could play in their development agenda. It is our responsibility to do that. And once that is done and nothing is forthcoming, perhaps then that you can now question the issue of the political leadership.
But do you also have to blame the government for the administrative shortcomings?
Look, I think I go back to what I said. I think the whole system needs to be revamped. Because each one has a responsibility. From a policy point of view, I think the National Assembly has a responsibility. And here, I would say that they might think I'm wrong, but the way they manage this whole disaster thing is more about accountability rather than the development approach. What do you have? What can we help you to improve? And all these other things.
Mr. Diop, it seems you want to come in here.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to...
We're running out of time. So.
Yeah, I just want to expand on what he is just saying. The issue is, both the National Assembly, Cabinet, the leadership is selected and appointed by the President. You see, I need not to buy the rice and so on, give to people just for them to give me their support. If I am doing my job as I'm supposed to do, I need not to go and be canvassing the Gambia for looking for votes. It is the result of my work that would give confidence to the people for them to give me.
I'm just finally, you talk about the need to revamp the system. Are you suggesting new laws? Or
No. I mean, like I said, I mean, yes, there is some work that needs to be done. We've started already in terms of the legal law framework and things like that. But I think it's more about the management of the way it should function and how it should be resourced, and that unless and until that is handled. you know, we are doomed. It will continue like this. We will be blaming, the government will be blamed, and it will continue. And it's simple. You just need to transform it into an institution that is supposed to be preparing and responding and coordinating response in the country. And that's it. It's simple and straightforward. I don't think there is any science or whatever into it. It's very simple and straightforward. But it takes the political will to do it.
Thank you so much, Alassane Senghor, Secretary General of the Gambia Red Cross Society, and Mr. Serimodi Diop, Executive Director, Deputy Executive Director of NDMA. Thank you so much for being on the program. I quite appreciate your time. The discussion is quite interesting, but you know, this is all what time allows us for. Well, viewers, with that, we bring an end to this week's edition of the State of Affairs program. I was your host, Aliou Cissé, and on behalf of the entire team here, we thank you so much for watching, and do join us next week. Until then, bye-bye.